everybody, and welcome back to Flock Talk. Today we are going to be going over how you can teach your bird to be able to wear a little prop hat for photos. I ended up having to bounce through a whole ton of different methods to try and figure out exactly what was going to work when it came to how to teach Mia to be comfortable with the hat actually touching the top of her head. And it took me about a week to sort through all those methods, but once we found the one that was going to work, it only took 3 days for it to actually go through with the process and have her fully wearing the hat. So it was long for me to teach to figure out how to make this tutorial for you guys, but it wasn't long to actually teach the concept. That being said, if you have a bird that is already shy of hands or very, very fearful towards strange objects, this is likely not going to be the tutorial for you. I would recommend starting out with some other hand taming tutorials first and working on building your bird's overall confidence before we go into actually putting a hat on top of their head. So as per usual, when we are working with any new unfamiliar object, our first step is always going to be to build their confidence around this object. How I'm choosing to do this with Mia is I'm just going to hold the hat off the perch in a distance that she is presenting comfortable body language for, and I'm simply going to mark and reward anytime she looks at the object, takes a couple steps towards it, opens her beak towards it, just any sort of small progressions that she's choosing to make on her own to investigate it. There's no rush on this. I'm not luring her over with my other hand. I'm simply standing and waiting for her to make a choice. Because I have done this for a lot of years with her, it doesn't take too long for her to catch on. She's a pretty confident little bean, so she starts waddling right over to the hat pretty quickly. If you have a new bird who's maybe not as comfortable with new scary things, you may just get them looking at it for the first few times. You may find it beneficial to use a target stick to help encourage them to kind of move around a little bit more, give them a task to focus on that doesn't quite involve the hat, just to help ease them into the concept of the hat existing in their environment while they build more positive associations with it. But once we are achieving this point here where Mia is very comfortably and confidently approaching this hat, she's actually choosing to touch it with her beak, I am going to complicate it a little bit more. Because this hat is going to be sitting in the blind spot on the top of her head, I want to ensure that she's comfortable with it in all sorts of contexts. So I want to make sure that I'm moving the hat. See, as before, I was holding it totally still while she was approaching it. Now, when I treat her, I am then going to move the hat forwards to approach her each and every rep. So this way she's getting used to the motions of the hat moving. She isn't finding those things scary. And I'm also now raising the hat a little bit more. So she's getting more comfortable with the hat in a bunch of varying different positions. So that way she's not just comfortable with it when it's on the same level as her. She can be comfortable with it even though it's up high. She can still be the one that's choosing to approach it right now. Since the end result will be us putting the hat over top of her blind spot, we want to make sure that she is first comfortable approaching it in those positions first. Otherwise she's just going to feel really stuck, she's going to feel really scared, and it's going to be a lose-lose situation all around. So I'm just going to twist the hat in a bunch of varying positions, a bunch of funky different positions for the hat to be in, have it up high, have it down low, turn it to the left, have the little ball facing her. I'm just going to really switch it up so that way she is comfortable no matter what position the hat ends up being in when I am presenting it to her. Once she is all set with that, I'm going to start to ask her to pass underneath it. And this is again to further build confidence and comfort with the hat, because I don't want the first time that I try and put this hat on her head to be a completely blank slate. I want her to have an established comfort with being underneath it. So I am using my other hand, my right hand, to lure her underneath the hat at this point. And I'm trying to find a nice balance of where she is comfortable with the hat being there, but kind of unsure. I'm trying to just barely teeter on the edge of her threshold here. And if she chooses to go up and beak the hat, I'm going to give her a second to think about it. Instead of immediately making it easier for her, I'm going to allow her to investigate it, give it a thorough look, maybe beak it a little bit, because sometimes that's all they need. Sometimes they just need to confirm that it's not a big scary thing. They just need to touch it a few times, and then they'll confidently pass under it. Other times, though, you'll notice that Mia does beak the hat or she does explore it, and then she chooses to back away or freeze. In those moments, I then raise the hat a little bit for her to make it easier. I'm not trying to induce a ton of fear. I'm just trying to push that little bit of a limit between comfort and discomfort so that way she can confidently make the choice to kind of test her own limits and decide whether or not she is capable of doing something that might be just a little bit scary. And we're going to keep going with this, moving the hat lower and lower and lower, so that way Mia will be the one that first makes contact with the hat on a blind spot of her body. And this is going to take a little bit of time. The first time the hat accidentally touches your bird, they might panic a little bit because it is a natural response. Something touched me, I wasn't expecting it to touch me, oh my god, they might take off and fly away. You might need to end the session there, give them a huge jackpot if that scary event did happen, and reset and make it easier for the next couple reps. But what I'm doing is just trying to get her to basically allow the hat to gently graze the back of her wings, or whichever part of her body she kind of chooses to let graze it. You'll notice the first few times that it does touch her body. The next session I do after that, the hat is a little bit higher. I've simplified it because a lot of the times that first touch it's really scary. So when you make it easier the next time, it sets them up for a bit more success, and you don't have to worry quite so much about them backtracking and going, oh no, it touched me, I really didn't like that, I don't want to do this anymore. By making it easier on the next time, you're giving them another positive association with it, and you kind of just bounce between having it lightly touch them and having it not touch them at all until they aren't getting so startled by the hat touching them in the first place. So we're going to keep going at this process until Mia can reliably walk underneath the hat, have it swipe down along her back, and have her show no signs of fear or discomfort, have her confidently keep going through rep after rep, no hesitation, no steps back on the next round. She's just totally content with the hat touching her in her blind spots or her more vulnerable spots of her body. Once we are totally confident with the bird deciding to make contact with the hat on the blind spots of their body, we are going to start to introduce the concept of us raising the hat over top of their head. And the important thing with this is to start at a distance that your bird is comfortable with, so raising it well over the top of their head where they're not trying to stretch up and bite it, somewhere where they can kind of look at it, acknowledge that it's there, and then choose to disengage from it and re-engage with you for the treat. So what I'm doing is I'm holding the hat above her. I am allowing her to look at it and investigate it. She might stretch her beak up towards it a little bit, and then I'm just waiting for the moment that she decides to give eye contact back to me instead. So she's no longer fixated on the hat or worried about it being above her. She doesn't feel like she needs to keep staring at it to feel safe. I'm waiting for the moment that she chooses to look at me instead and show me that she's comfortable with the thing being above her. And I'm going to repeat that exact process every time that I bring the hat a little bit lower. So what's important here is I'm not lowering the hat when Mia's not looking, okay? I am putting the hat over her head at a designated distance for that repetition, and then I'm removing it. So I'm showing Mia the hat. I am showing her exactly how high it is going to be above her head. She is looking at it, acknowledging how far away it is from her, and then she is choosing that she is comfortable with that distance or not. If I were to put the hat above her head and start lowering it while she's not looking, I am going to freak her out. If she then looks back up and suddenly the hat is a whole inch closer to her than it was before, she's going to panic. That's really terrifying. She wasn't expecting it. She didn't hear it coming. It doesn't make a sound. So it's going to cause a lot of fear, and it's going to cause you to take some massive steps back if you just surprise them with the hat all of a sudden being there. Remember that the top of your bird's head and the back of your bird's head is virtually completely blind to them. Unless they're turning around and looking, your bird cannot see what is in that spot. So they genuinely cannot tell that the hat has moved closer at that point in time. So for every repetition, you are presenting the hat at a designated height and you are leaving it at that height. You are trying your best not to let your hand deviate too much. You are making sure that your bird is acknowledging the height that your hat has been placed at, and then comfortably choosing to disengage from the hat on their own. If your bird is really struggling with the disengaging even at your full arm length, you can feed a treat just while they're looking at it, or you could even use a treat to kind of guide their face away from the hat for a second just to help show them what you would like them to do. But do try just to have the hat at a far enough away distance that that response doesn't occur in the first place. If they are comfortable with the height that the hat is at, they should be able to acknowledge it and disengage pretty easily. If they're getting stuck, it's likely that you need to go back a few steps because your bird just isn't comfortable with the hat in general, and you can maybe ease them into this a little bit simpler. Moving on from this, we want to encourage Mia, as an end result, to be able to target the back of her head into the socket of the hat. And this is challenging for two reasons. One, it's a blind spot. She can't see that. Trying to target her head into it is going to be quite difficult. And two, she's a prey animal. Having something touch her suddenly on a blind spot is going to induce a panic response. That's pretty natural for them to have. It's an innate response. And trying to teach her to be okay with something like that is going to be a big challenge. So what I ended up doing to make this a little bit easier for her was I fed her at the exact same time that the hat is touching her on the back of her head, and I tried to make sure that her head was moving into the hat, not the hat moving down onto her head. And how I go about doing this, and I apologize that it's a little hard to see with the camera angle that I gave you here, but I have some seeds between my fingers. I show Mia the hat, I present the hat over her, she disengages from it to show me that she is okay with going forwards. I present the treats to her, and I know it looks like it, but I am not just grabbing her beak and moving her head into the hat. What is happening is she is grabbing the seed between my fingers, and then I'm very lightly lifting my hand up, so if she chooses to keep following those seeds, or she chooses to keep eating the seeds from between my fingers, then the hat will end up touching her head. If she ends up letting go or saying that she doesn't want to keep eating the seeds because she knows the hat's going to touch her, she can just let go. I'm not like holding her beak and not allowing her to go away. She is the one holding on to me, and she can let go if she is uncomfortable with going forwards or she doesn't want to raise her head into the hat. And that's very important because once again, we're trying to give our birds confidence, we're trying to give them agency over the situation we have here. And so if I were to just grab her and stick her into it, that's going to create a lot of fear, that's going to create a lot of panic, and she can't go anywhere. So I'm trying to make sure that she is, as best as I can provide, choosing to engage in this activity. So I'm presenting my fingers with the little treats between them, I'm letting her eat them, and then I'm gently lifting my hand up just a little bit so that way the hat will just lightly touch her, and I'm immediately releasing all of the rewards to her in that exact moment. As we go through with this and she gets more comfortable and confident, you'll notice that that startle response starts to fade away a little bit. So in those first few touches, she kind of wants to touch the hat and immediately jerk away. As she gets more comfortable with this, she's going to want to hold her head there a little bit longer. She's not going to be as panicked about it. She's not going to be scared about it because it hasn't hurt her. She's learning, positive associations with all the treats that come when she allows her head to touch the hat. And so we're going to be able to work with this a bit more. So as soon as I notice that she's not jolting her head away when the hat touches her, I'm going to start to phase out my right hand, the hand that has the treats in it, a little bit. So I'm no longer kind of guiding her beak up directly. I'm going to have it just a little bit away from her beak and then lifting it up in the same motion. So I'm still guiding her beak up, but she's no longer touching me and I'm no longer sort of physically moving her in that regard. She's just following the guidance of my hand and kind of looking where it is and generally moving to try and reach the treats that are in the fingers. And it's repeating the same process. I'm marking and rewarding the moment that her head touches the hat and going from there. And this is basically the rest of the concept for the rest of this, is we're just going to keep repeating this over and over and over again until our bird is totally relaxed and comfortable with the hat touching the top of her head. And if you notice that jolt response starting to come back where they rush their head away or they kind of panic, I'd go back to just rewarding and holding the treats in your fingers at the same time as the hat is touching their head. That helps kind of break down that response a little bit and helps her slow down so she's not getting quite as freaked out. It's totally normal to need to bounce back and forth between things when you are training. It's not linear. You're not going to go from point A to point B in a simple step-by-step process. You're going to be kind of bouncing between step 1 and step 2 and then back to step 1 and then up to step 3. And you're just kind of moving with where your bird's comfort level is. Just because they were okay with the hat touching their head 2 repetitions ago doesn't mean they're going to feel totally confident about it with the repetition that you're on now. So it's just important to meet them where they're at, slow down if they need it, back up a few steps, simplify the process. They're just trying to understand what the heck you want from them, and you are doing your best to communicate it to them. It's normal, it's okay to have to back up and slow things down a little bit. Don't feel like they're never going to learn it just because they suddenly aren't comfortable with the hat touching them all of a sudden. Just meet them where they're at, slow the process down, and you'll get back up there. So as we go along this, I am trying to focus on a few different things. Now that Mia's pretty comfortable with the hat touching her head, I am going to focus on rewarding a bit more duration with it. So instead of rewarding the second that her head ends up touching the hat for that little split moment, because I'm not going to be able to take a photo like that, that's really quick. Even if I take a video and freeze frame it, it's going to be super blurry. I want her to be able to pause her head. I want there to be a little bit more duration in there where she can kind of hold still and be comfortable with the hat touching her for maybe at least a full second. I could probably get a photo in. So that's going to be kind of my goal. So what I'm going to start doing is the exact same process, but I'm going to be a little bit more picky about what I ask for. So when she lifts her head up, if she taps it and runs away, I'm either not going to give her a treat or I'm going to give her a really small one. And then the next time, I'm going to wait for her to maybe tap her head 2 times, or I'm going to wait for her to hold her head just a tiny smidgen bit longer in contact with the hat. And that way she'll start to notice that the really big jumbo delicious rewards are coming the longer she holds her head in the hat, And that's how I'm going to be able to shape a little bit more duration here, where she can sit still, have the hat sitting on her head, and I'll be able to snap a good photo. Once I am content with the length of time that Mia is holding her head in the hat for, with my hand just a little bit in front of her face to kind of give her a point to focus on and help guide her head up into the hat, I need to phase my hand out of the way, because it's not going to be a really good photo if it's just a lot of hands and one bird. Not going to be a pretty photo. So what I'm going to do is work on phasing out at least the one hand. I don't have a setup to dangle the hat. I'm sure if you wanted 0 hands in this photo, you could either Photoshop it out, or you could maybe tie the hat up with a little clear string and then target your bird under the hat that way, because that would be very easy to kind of hide in a picture. But I'm okay having my back hand in that photo, so I'm not too worried about that today. But the right hand that's holding the treat, that doesn't need to be there. That's just kind of obnoxious and blocking out what could be a really cute Santa hat wearing bird photo. So what I'm going to do is present my hand a little bit further away. And this is going to be a lot of trial and error in what your bird prefers and what your bird understands. With Mia, I found it worked best if I kind of raised my hand away on a diagonal. So instead of it going straight back, that would cause her to basically just stretch her neck out really long like a turtle. And it wasn't the cutest photo. So what worked best for her was keeping my hand kind of high and phasing my hand out that way. So I'm going to back it up every repetition, just like ½ centimeter at a time. So she's learning to lift her head up and contact the hat, with my hand being slightly further away, so I can eventually have it out of frame and no longer in the photo anymore. And once my hand is far enough away where I don't have it in my picture frame anymore, or I think I can confidently get the shot I'm looking for without my hand being visible, then I'm content with that. I'm calling that done. That's as good enough of a behavior as I need this to be. This isn't going to be some show-stopping thing I need my bird to wear a hat for 20 minutes for. This is just, I want to be able to take a cute photo. It's okay if all my hands are still being used to kind of lure the shape that I want. They just don't need to be in frame. It's a photo, so it's going to work just fine for what I need it for. If you have a bit of a bigger bird and you wanted your bird to actually be able to wear the hat and have both your hands completely gone out of the picture, you could either suspend the hat on a string, as I had suggested before, and then your other hand is still just kind of guiding their head and helping it give something to focus on to stay still. Or you would gradually phase out your other hand and introduce them to the weight of the hat a bit more, where you might want to kind of let it go just a little bit and then take the hat off again and then hold it a little bit longer, and so on and so forth. It's absolutely possible to be able to let a hat rest on your bird's head and have no problem. The only reason why I didn't do it with Mia is because she is so small, and this hat and the shape that it is, there's no way, absolutely no way, I was going to be able to have this stay on her head and not just fall off outside of like sticking Velcro on her head, which we're not going to do. That was a joke. Don't do that. So it was just not going to stay. So I'm okay with being able to hold it. Perhaps if I had used like a wide sun hat or something, I could maybe get that to balance on her head. But as it stands, a cone-shaped hat is not going to have a high percentage of being able to stay. It's just not going to happen. So I'm just going to hold it, and I'm going to be okay with that. That's going to be my end result. By all means, take it further if you want to. I'd love to see how far you guys can take getting your birds comfortable wearing little hats. It can be really cute for seasonal photos and Christmas cards and whatnot. But that's where I'm going to leave it for today. So that is it for this tutorial. Like I said, it's not an overly complicated one to do, but it is important to really move at your bird's pace and make sure that they are comfortable each step of the way. We are working with a prey animal in the blind spot right at the back of their head. So it's going to take a bit of time for them to truly feel confident and comfortable with something being back there, and it's going to be a little bit of trial and error on your part. If you try and rush that process, you're just going to end up taking a lot more steps back than you are going forwards. So it's important to really make sure that you go at your bird's pace and move with them instead of against them for this process. Now, I obviously used a Santa hat for my tutorial here because it is Christmas season, but you could use any random prop that you want to stick on your bird's head. That being said, please don't permanently affix something to the back of their head. Don't have a chin strap and have it stay on there for really long periods of time. This is a prey animal that is their blind spot. It's going to be really unsettling for them to have something there for a longer period of time. This is just for temporary 2 seconds. It's going to be on their head so you can snap a photo. But that will do it for today. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.